Welcome to Old Guy Talks to Me, a podcast dedicated to helping guys create kick-ass lives for themselves and those that they love. Ladies, if you want to know what your guy is thinking, this podcast is for women too. Each week, a special guest helps you create that life you've imagined. We talk anti-aging medicine, personal growth, relationships and hot sex. Yeah, you hear me, getting laid more frequently, other guy vices, and topics that many don't want to talk about but need to. Just because you're getting older doesn't mean you have to be old. Don't want to miss anything? Be sure to subscribe, share, rate, and review this podcast. And be sure to go to www.thestandard.academy/magazine and grab a free copy of our new digital magazine, The Standard Academy, where we talk about erogenous zones, growing hair back, and other things that will help you create that kick-ass life. Now get ready to listen up and share with friends.
Dr.
You
Oris?
can just you can just call me Morris. I don't
Yeah,
care.
that sounds fine. Okay.
Okay, all
You're
right.
not a stickler, neither am I.
This is Oris, the official old guy at oldguytalkstome.com, a podcast dedicated to helping older guys create kick-ass lives for themselves and those that they love. And part of that is actually dealing with one of the things that comes to in our life is when it comes to an end, death. And today I have Craig Hogan, PhD, and he's president and co-founder of the Afterlife Research and Education Institute and co-founder of Seek Reality Online. He's been a professor of business communications, a staff development administrator at a medical school, and university and graduate professor in the Christian Ministry Department of Wheaton College. Craig has been studying and writing about the life after this life and afterlife communication for 30 years. He is a co-author of several books on the subject. So welcome, Craig. Welcome, Craig.
Well, thank you. It's a joy to be here. I'm very anxious to talk to you.
Okay. And by the way, Wheaton is in Washington, isn't it?
Wheaton is outside of Chicago.
Oh, is it? There must have been
Yeah.
another Wheaton because
Yeah.
we were up in the state of Washington and
Yeah.
we drove by a Wheaton college. I thought
There are lots of Wheatons in the world, and I'm not sure why they couldn't come up with a better name, but yeah, the one that I was at was in Wheaton, and at the time it was a Baptist, strictly Baptist college, and since then they've become much more liberal about their views. But I didn't fit in because I have a much larger spiritual view than the narrow Baptist Christian view.
Okay. All right. So let's get into it. How did you get into this area of afterlife?
Well, I turned a half century old, and about that time, I started meeting psychics. They just kept coming into my life. I didn't know why. I didn't know any psychics prior to that. And so I discovered that I have psychic ability. I can sit in my office in Illinois and I can look at things on people's desks in New Jersey or Florida or someplace else in the United States. And they will tell me there's something on the desk and I will sketch it and then I'll send it to them. They send me a picture. And sure enough, it's exactly what it was. And so I learned that I have psychic ability, and that means the reality is much more than what we see. It's much more than the world around us. And so I started delving into it. And what I discovered is that the reason there's so much more is because we never die. We never come to the end of this life. We have a transition where we go on to the next life, rather like graduating from school, but we never die. And so then that kept me going. And I have ever since devoted my life to studying and teaching people about the afterlife and afterlife communication.
So when you talk about a transition
Mm-hmm.
from this life, are you talking from a human going to another human life, or what are you talking about?
What happens is we are actually only the inside. We are our minds. We are using bodies right now, but we are not in the bodies. And when we transition to the next life, we just have a new body. It is a body which is fit. It is in its 20s or 30s. And there are no old people in the next life. You know, all of us old people now, because I'm 77, all of us people now are going to be coming into new bodies and new worlds and new environments. And it sounds like it's too good to be true. It's pie in the sky. But we are getting our evidence from people communicating back to us from the afterlife. And they tell us consistently that this is the way that life is.
Now, I must admit I have a great deal of skepticism about what you're saying here about communication from the afterlife.
Hmm.
And what I recall, actually, this was I don't know if you know who Chris Angel is.
I heard the name, but I
Okay,
don't
he's
know.
a
Don't know.
he refers to him. He doesn't refer to himself as a magician. As a illusionist,
Hmm.
and he had a show on TV, and he got really pissed off at one of the magicians who said that he can connect people with their family members in the afterlife. And I mean,
Yeah.
he just ripped into that guy. So
Yeah.
I'm not gonna rip into you, but I do really have a great deal of skepticism about what you're saying. Now, I do believe in an afterlife, but as I look at some of the things that you talk about in that afterlife, you can have sex in the afterlife. Car enthusiasts get together for rallies in the afterlife. I There is no hell. Your deceased pets are patiently waiting for you. Uh, Babies not born for whatever reason are waiting for you in the afterlife. And suicides are met with great love. You can eat, drink, and smoke as much as you want in the afterlife, and you live with anyone you want to in the afterlife, or with no one if you don't want to. So that's a that even in this life, that's a pretty full
Yeah.
menu of events.
Yeah. It sounds like heaven.
So yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it sounds great, but what what actually how do you actually substantiate all these comments?
Everything that,
And
yeah, everything I write about has sources. So I cite the sources. My books have over 2,500 sources. And these sources are people speaking from the life after this life. We know it's them because when they come through, they will say things to the individual who's there with them about their lives together, the memories that they have, but they'll even talk about the things that are contemporary, things they did yesterday, things they did before coming down to the meeting. And so it shows that they are still alive and well and living in the next life. And we have evidence from people like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was named one of the 100 most influential women of the 20th century. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross gives a story in which she was walking down the hall at the University of Chicago, and a woman walked next to her. The woman was Mrs. Schwartz, but Mrs. Schwartz had died 2 years before. It was a patient of hers. And so when Mrs. Schwartz came to her office, she said, "You can't give up on your work on death and dying right now. It's too important. Stay with it." And so she touched her. Spoke with her extended. And then when she got up and left, she walked out the door. And Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross went to the door to see if there was anybody out there. There was nobody in the whole hallway, all up and down the hallway. So these are people. We have many, many of these cases with people like we have one by a Bible scholar, a Bible translator, E.B. Phillips, and I'm sorry, J.P. Phillips, and he had an experience in which the author of Narnia and the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis, just appeared in his room and gave him some advice and talked to him about it. But these are people who would not lie. They're not given to hallucinations, and yet these people do come to them.
If you missed that URL, it's in the show notes. Don't worry, it's right there for you to use. This is Oris from the Standard Academy, a men's lifestyle coaching program. Let me ask you, have you paid a price? Have you paid a price in other areas of your life for your professional success? Yeah, you know what I mean. Are you just in a roommate situation with your wife? Or are you arguing all the time? Certainly there's no sex. And your kids, do they ignore you? Or worse yet, do they disrespect you? Is that your case? Is your life not working out the way you had planned? If so, I'm going to encourage you to revitalize yourself and get on a short activation call with me. That's right. Get on a short call with me. And I will, share with you some things that you can do to bring back that energy into your life. Go to the standard.academy /15-minute activation call and schedule now. That's /15 activation call and schedule that right now. Don't wait. Don't hesitate to procrastinate. This is your opportunity to start the turnaround in your life?
Well, okay, okay. So we're not going to question these people's integrity. At the same time, people hallucinate all the time, or they have things that they think are going on that aren't really going on. And so, the things that you cite is individual anecdotal evidence, which is not really what you'd call hardcore science.
Yes.
Is, somebody has an experience and they report it to you, and and so we take it, or some people take it for granted. I just I'm still not buying it. And Craig, I'll have to tell you, I had I'm not buying the idea that there's actually things beyond things that we don't understand, because I actually had an interview with a psychic detective a few months ago, and she has been rewarded she's been awarded awards by various police departments for helping them solve cold cases. So I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but that doesn't really I'm still not hearing anything that really says, all this list of wonderful things that you can do, eat as much as you want, drink as much as you want, smoke as much as you want. You know, it's just kind of a laundry list of wishful thinking. And at the same time, there's outside of the anecdotal evidence, somebody has, and people have experiences. We all, I have premonitions about things and things like that. But it's still not. It still doesn't jive with there's going to be this playland, this adult playland in the afterlife.
But it is true. Now, one of the things that you said that it would have to take a scientific approach to it. You would have to have the science behind it. And you said that there are psychics who are able to get information they couldn't possibly know. They get it from the greater reality. But the fact that the psychics get that information indicates that the mind is not in the brain, because the mind couldn't be in the brain and get this information about things that are far away, that are in the past, things that are in the future, precognition. They are successful, and they are highly thought of by the police for that reason. So what that shows is that the mind is not in the brain. So when the body dies and the brain dies, the mind just keeps on going. So we have a lot of instances of psychics being able to do things like that to prove that the mind is not in the brain.
Well, when I spoke with her, we never got into this. We talked about different dimensions and things like that, and that she experiences things differently in a different dimension. But like I said, I'm still not buying the afterlife thing, because there's other explanations. I interviewed a polymath too, and he talked about different dimensions outside of the ones that we were familiar with. And actually that kind of synced very nicely with the discussion I had with the psychic detective in terms of being in different dimensions, in terms of her being able to feel certain things. It was very interesting that when I interviewed her, when we were talking about specific cases that she was involved in, her eyes would go up and to the left. And I asked her, like, I see your eyes are going up to the left. I said, are you visualizing that? And she goes, no, I'm actually there.
Yeah.
So I do have a certain belief, but again, it doesn't get me quite to the cornucopia of pleasure.
Yeah. So I have the evidence, and the evidence is in 15 different areas. We actually have recordings of people who come through, people who are passed away. A recording of a woman named Annie. Annie had died when she was 66, and she died from cancer. And her husband, Dr. Dinshaw Nanji, a faculty member at the University of Birmingham, was absolutely devastated. He wanted to get a hold of his lovely Annie. And so he went to a medium named Leslie Flint. And in 20th century, this medium would be able to sit in a room and people would speak. Their voices would come out of the air. We have thousands of recordings of these people. But the important thing is Dr. Nanji would travel twice a year from Birmingham, from Sweden, where he moved, to London, England, to sit with Leslie Flint. And Annie would come through every time, and she would tell him about things in his life. She told him about going on a plane with him when they went to a conference, what was at the conference. and all these things that were happening contemporaneously. And it was her, everything about her voice, all of the intonation, all the memories of the past. And so we have thousands of these recordings of people who come through from the other side.
Well, yeah, but again, I'm going to say that is a staple of many magicians and people that are on stage that do that as a general rule, and they get down to they're able to successfully kind of work their way into the facts of a particular person.
Yeah. Now, that would mean it would have to be the medium. So in this case, Leslie Flint, the medium who would sit, they would test him. They tested him hundreds of times. They put a throat microphone on to make sure that he wasn't the person speaking. They put a elastoplast bandage over his mouth. They had him put colored water in his mouth and spit it out afterwards to show that he hadn't opened his mouth. And they tested him, and still the people came through. But more important than that, Dr. Nanji knew this was his wife. The medium couldn't have disguised his voice or pretended to be his wife. She was telling him things about their lives together, and she was telling him things about what was going on in his flat, where he was living, and how he should redecorate it. He was telling her about when she went to the funeral home and when she went to the gravesite, and he said, "You keep putting flowers on my grave. I'm not there. I'm not there." And so we have all of these that we couldn't have fooled Dr. Nanji every 6 months for over an hour of conversation to think that was his wife, unless it really was.
Thank you for joining Dr. Orist and his incredible guest. Like what you heard and learned? Then be sure to do 3 things. 1. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. 2. Share this with someone who may need to hear it. 3. Leave a review and rate this podcast. Opt in at www.thestandard.academy/magazine and get our free digital magazine with savings, articles, and deeper dives into cool controversy. Be the guy who takes action. Without action, you're not going to get the results you want. Thank you again, and make it a great day.